Welcome to Comics League Indie Wednesday, people. I am Jared, and today we are talking about a very interesting indie book that was suggested to me by Man of Steel V2. Shout out. We are talking about Geiger from Geoff Johns. This is published by Image, art by Gary Frank and Brad Anderson. So, Geiger. So, you may be wondering, okay, so Geoff Johns wrote an indie comic? Yes, and I remember when this was announced, this was like a big to-do because Geoff Johns left DC. Like this was during the purge of talent that happened at DC that I've talked about many times on the channel. And I remember seeing this, and I was surprised. I'm like, I did not see that coming because Geoff Johns was like through and through DC. He's now back doing like Flashpoint Beyond in an ongoing JSA book, which I'm very excited for. But at the time, it was like, if Geoff Johns can leave, DC's really screwed. You may be wondering, what is Geiger? Geiger is like a post-apocalyptic, I would say superhero-esque book. You'll know what I'm talking about as I get into the plot of the book. But, so let's get started, shall we? So the story opens up. It's two dudes in a nuclear crater, and one is telling the other a story, and it's telling them the story of the glowing man. His name was Tariq Geiger. And this was, so the story does a flashback, and it's during, I would say, it's during like an unknown war in 2030. And nukes are in the air, so Tariq runs and gets his family in their nuclear fallout bunker. Not before Tariq himself is shot, and he tells his family, go into the bunker, don't worry about me, I'll come for you. So the bomb goes off, and then all of a sudden it just fades to black. You see like Tariq getting like disintegrated by the nuclear bomb blast. Then it picks up 20 years later. So about 2050. So then these scavengers are looking at, so everyone's in suits, in these nuclear suits. And you can't, apparently you can't survive outside without the suits. And if you try and be outside without a suit, you'll start growing tumors and start turning into those guys from Mad Max. So these scavengers, they're searching. They stumble upon Tariq's home, and they see this bunker that's empty. Then they see this wall that's made of like cars and such, like that. And then they see Tariq, and he's in a hood outfit without a suit on. And they're like, well, that's interesting. No one can survive without a suit. And then on the back, on his back are two, like, they look like essentially nightsticks sticking out of his back. And when he takes them out, he turns into this. And what I love about the coloring in this book is that when he's the glowing form, it actually feels like he is actually glowing. Like there's actually 3D like art and such. So so Brad Anderson does a fantastic job. And Tariq doesn't attack him. He just goes, boo. And then they just run away. Because the glowing man is like a massive, like a big, like legend in the post-apocalyptic times. And then all he does is he puts the sticks back in his little backpack, and that reverts him back into his regular form. And then we see Tariq's day-to-day life. He reads books and comics, and he's read like pretty much all of his books because it's been like 20 years. He has basically tick marks on his wall that basically indicate the passage of time. And then we cut to Las Vegas, where we have this guard who's reporting to this king, this boy king kind of, and he's saying, okay, we have to go take out this Geiger guy because this king wants glory, essentially. So America pretty much post bomb going off has turned into like some areas controlled by the U.S. government, but a significant portion is like lawless separate kingdoms, kind of like Game of Thrones. So then we find out, so then we get another flashback in the next issue. And this is talking about Tariq having like an inoperable, having like cancer. It's not inoperable, but they're going to resort to like experimental treatment. So then we cut more to Las Vegas, and then it turns out, so what happens is that when you're traveling, you have to wear the suit. Then you can wear like all your clothes. Like there's people showing up in evening wear. There's a casino, and apparently, so one of the workers of the casino actually manages to steal this bag that contains the nuclear football. And for those of you that don't know, the nuclear football is the device that's held by the president that once you input the launch codes allows you to launch nukes essentially, or like order the launch. So the worker steals the nukes, steals the football because she wants to barter and leave the area before her daughter's forced to like serve at the bar, if you catch my drift. But then the guards find her and first off kill her, and then her kids escape in like a car. They drive out. They're attacked by giant ants that were no doubt nuclearized, in other words. And then before they can do that, before they can get killed, Tariq's two-headed wolf dog shows up and saves them. And Tariq is like, you shouldn't be outside. It's so badass. This whole book is super badass. And yeah, just look at that. That is just incredible. I freaking love the character design for Geiger. He looks so dope with the hood, the body armor, the two sticks that when he takes them out, the thing he can actually hit people with them. So he has weapons and stuff. Then it turns out the king had a run-in with Tariq, and Tariq like badly burned his face, and we'll get the issue for that later. So then we get more background on Tariq's condition. He needed like experimental cancer surgery that he was getting, and then the glowing man just so much of this so many of these images that want his phone wallpaper. Jeez, so good. So the way it works, by the way, the way it works is that so Tariq's body is constantly like throwing out nuclear, like, what is it? Nuclear radiation. So when he puts the things back in his back, that like essentially cancels out the radiation. That's why he turns back into a regular human being when he has the things in his back. But you notice he doesn't have any hair or eyebrows or anything, because it's kind of like chemo, in other words. So Tariq decides, I'm going to bring you somewhere safe. And at first he's like hesitant, but then he decides, okay, so I'm going to help these guys, because he's a flashback to his family. So then Tariq gets a flashback to the king coming to his home, and the actual thing. So the king shows up and wants to like essentially loot Tariq's home, and he sees like the bunker that Tariq's family is in. So as it turns out, I do this because it turns out the family's been dead for 20 years, because it turns out when the bombs hit, it like caused a hole to develop in the ground. It weakened the bunker, and that led to like the bunker not providing any protection. So the family's been dead for like 20 years. And then Tariq goes, you've robbed me of hope. He takes out the sticks and completely not impresses these dudes. Like it's not even a fight. He's whacking fools. His wolf shows up and bites someone's arm off. And then what he does, as he's the glowing man, he just reaches onto the king's face and just burns a significant portion of his head. Hence, which is why half his face is burned. Kind of like Two-Face. And then we get, and then in the next issue, we get more on Tariq, and we see, and then he essentially, again, agrees to take them to NORAD, which is where essentially the last vestiges of the U.S. government are. So, and then we get more backup, more information on like the suit that Tariq wears. It turns out that the whole thing is like trying to like keep his radiation at bay, because if he doesn't have it if he doesn't regulate his radiation, he will explode like a nuclear bomb. And that's what the sticks do, because the sticks are made of boron, which cancels out the nuclear radiation. It sort of dampens it. So then, essentially, we get the king. It turns out he feeds people to the beast, but it's actually his overweight mother. And then we get more information on the casino. Then we have Tariq and the kids are beset by these. I call them like the Mad Max people. They're called the organ people, and what that means is that what they do, they've been driven mad by the radiation. And they're like deformed by the radiation. And what they do is they kidnap people and take their organs. Then as one organ in their own body falls, they replace it with someone like this, with like a fresh organ. They spend them so they hunt unwilling donors. It's kind of like there was this race in Star Trek Voyager that did that. I think they're called like the Phage or something like that, or that may have been the group. What is it? That may have been the virus that beset that race. But you get the general idea. If you saw Star Trek Voyager, drop in the comments what that race was called. But that's the same idea. So Tariq goes, drive. He jumps out of the car, goes full glowing man. He goes, hi. And then they try and like whack him with a knife, but the radiation like burns the knife. And he goes to town. He jumps on the truck. The truck bucks forward and like crashes. It's so cool. And then they they find the U.S. government. And the U.S. government essentially like takes them in while the king is pursuing them. They go into NORAD. They find it's essentially like Fallout in that it's like this supposed idyllic society. I say supposed it because something happens here that's going to be very interesting. You see this kid. They're essentially getting a tour of the facility. Turns out there's like a school, and they're learning all this stuff about like surviving in an apocalypse, essentially. Then what's kind of funny is that Tariq is like strapped to a medical bed. He's knocked out, and someone takes out his stick and goes, "What does this do?" He wakes up and just melts through the handcuffs. He goes, "Can I have that? Thank you." And then so it turns out, so the son, the boy, he has leukemia, and the thing about it is that no one with like cancer or radiation can live here. So they weren't going to kick him out. They were going to euthanize him. So and by the boy's name is Henry, and so the sister goes to save Henry, and they run into Tariq, and Tariq's like, they're gonna kill my son, my brother, and the sister's like, they're gonna kill my brother. Dang, I can't speak today. But and Tariq says, no, that's not happening. Then we get this background of like the U.S. and wars. And this is also kind of hinting at Geoff Johns' other properties because he has other image properties like Junkyard Joe and Redcoat, and these may exist in the same continuity. I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So at that point, they find the kid and they save him. And then Tariq is basically taking the role of comforter because he's like, I was sick too, but I went somewhere where they helped me control like my radiation, so I'm going to help you too. Essentially, we're seeing Tariq grow a heart. So then they run into the hangar, and then they're besieged by Junkyard Joe, the character that's in an upcoming Geoff Johns book from Mad Ghost Productions. And it turns out that so they adapted a comic strip character. So then Tariq it takes his stick out and then starts to whack this dude. But then Junkyard Joe crushes one of the sticks. So that's a big problem. Tariq tries to melt the dude's head, but it turns out it's a robot. And it turns out so Tariq is going to explode, and because both sticks now have been broken. So and we do also get this dope scene where like Junkyard Joe's about to kill the kids. Tariq grabs a stick and goes, "Get away!" and he just stabs him, and then kills Junkyard Joe. But the other stick was destroyed, and it turns out the kids helped Tariq like control his radiation briefly, but it's not exactly working so well. In that, we see here throughout the story that he's like that now that he doesn't have like now that the harness is not working to control the radiation, he's kind of like going radiation then not going radiation. So it's like he's gonna explode like a bomb. He's a ticking time bomb. Then they're besieged by the king again, who is pursuing them for the nuclear football. Then what's cool is that he sends one of his knights after Tariq, and Tariq just turns into like I call him Nuclear Man or like the Glowing Man, just tears the car apart. And then everyone else is like, screw this, we're out of here. And then they leave, abandoning the king. Tariq manages to bring the kids to this to essentially Copper Canyon, Mexico, where there is where the doctor is that essentially built the suit for Tariq. And he goes, okay, just You guys go in there. I'm going to handle this dude. Plus, Tariq is not exactly welcome there, which indicates to me that there's more to the story. So I'm happy. Then Tariq essentially goes to the king, a week in this location, come along, and then we'll deal with this. Tariq walks toward the king, and the king's like, oh no, he's going to, and then he explodes in nuclear fire. So essentially it's like, oh no, he explodes. What's cool, the next 2 pages are just the green light from the radiation. Then all we see is kaboom. And you may think, okay, so that means Tariq's dead. Not exactly, because even the narrator of the story is saying that that was the beginning of the story. And it turns out they want to essentially recruit Tariq for the U.S. government. And that's the end of Volume 1 of Geiger. Jeez, this book was freaking dope. Oh my God. Thank you for Man of Steel V2 for suggesting it. I'm sorry it took me so long to get to it, but I am so glad I covered this because the art is killer. The writing is superb. It's Geoff Johns. And oh my, it's like I can't even even the colors are dope because when he's in the glowing man form, it kind of looks like he's actually glowing. I was reading this and I'm like, oh, this is dope as hell. It seems like a mix of like Batman and Nightwing because he has the 2 sticks. And I definitely liked how when he's as the glowing man, practically nothing can hurt this guy. It's like someone tries to stab him in the head with a knife. The knife just burns and melts. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And plus, I love the post-apocalyptic world that Geoff Johns made with Vegas being this lawless place. Because let's face it, it is lawless. And you see it turns into Game of Thrones. And even the U.S. government is not faultless because of how they were going to euthanize someone just because they had cancer and stuff. Probably because they don't like radiation. Understandable because of where they're living. It doesn't make it any right. And I also like how Tariq goes from this. He essentially has a Mandalorian arc. And what I mean by that is that he goes from not caring and going, I'm just here to survive and stuff, to, okay, I have to help these kids because they're a family and I lost my family. So I can make up for that by helping these kids get somewhere safe. And I like how this opens up a whole nother world because you see, Junkyard Joe is another character from Geoff Johns' Mad Ghost Productions. Then you also have the Red Coat. And they also kind of hint at this because there's a timeline somewhere in this book. Hang on, I'm trying to find the actual timeline that actually indicates that all of Geoff Johns' Mad Ghost books are actually in one continuity. They just take place at different time periods throughout U.S. history. Yeah, here we go. So you have the Red Coat in 1776, obviously. And then you have all these different characters. You have the Northerner, the Monster. Junkyard Joe is in 1972, so that's going to be a Vietnam book. American Widow X in 97. The first Ghost is captured on films. That'd be 2025. The Unknown War Erupts is 2030, and that's the nuclear part. Then you have Geiger is in 2050. So, in other words, Geoff Johns essentially created his own world with Geiger. It's essentially like how Geoff Johns used Justice League to launch the new 52 world where everything expands from there. And I really, 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 really love what he managed to do. And I'm very much looking forward to following this series more because, oh my gosh, Geoff Johns does not disappoint. Absolutely does not. And this is coming from, so I just finished reading the second omnibus for Geoff Johns' Green Lantern. And I'm on a big Geoff Johns kick right now, particularly with Green Lantern. And this feels like that. Plus, again, the art, I really cannot emphasize that enough because it looks like Geiger is glowing. The colorist, and that was Brad Anderson, that dude is on top of his game. I mean, it just looks so cool. I'm trying to find, in my mind, the best image of Geiger when he's the glowing man. But geez, it just looks so good. I'm just like, geez. And that's why I noticed Geoff Johns has never had really a bad artist on his books. He's probably very selective on who yeah, right here. Look at this. It looks like he's actually glowing. Wow. So on that note, that's where I'm going to leave it. I hope you guys enjoyed this Indie Wednesday. Thank you again to Man of Steel V2 for suggesting this book because, oh my gosh, do I love it so much. I'm going to read this multiple times because it's so cool and so jam-packed with stuff. And hopefully they do a volume 2 because, they probably will because it just says volume 1 at the end of the book. And I will be covering more of this. Definitely be covering more of this on Indie Wednesday. Stay heroic, everyone, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.